My daughter-in-law walked into our family's country club like she owned the place, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor with calculated precision. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her for months, documenting every lie, every secret meeting, every betrayal. When she introduced me to her lover as just Michael's sad old father, I smiled and said 5 words that drained the color from her face. I own this law firm. But that was only the beginning of the justice that would reshape our entire family forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The morning started like any other Thursday at our estate in Greenwich. I was reviewing quarterly reports from my law firm when Margaret burst through the door of my study without knocking. My son's wife had developed this irritating habit of treating my home like her personal kingdom, a presumption that had grown worse since Michael made partner at Goldman Sachs last year. "Dad Thompson," she announced, using that syrupy tone that set my teeth on edge. "I need to borrow the yacht this weekend." She didn't ask, mind you. She declared it like she was informing me of weather conditions. I looked up from the legal briefs spread across my mahogany desk. At 72, I'd spent 5 decades building Thompson & Associates into one of Connecticut's most prestigious corporate law practices. I'd learned to read people the way other men read stock prices, and Margaret's body language screamed deception louder than a fire alarm. "The yacht?" I set down my reading glasses and studied her face. "What's the occasion?" "Just a small gathering with some friends from the yacht club." Her eyes darted toward the window, a tell I'd noticed months ago when she started fabricating stories about her whereabouts. "Nothing fancy. Maybe 10 people. The Sea Fortune could accommodate 50 guests comfortably. Margaret was either planning something much larger than she claimed, or she wanted the privacy that only comes with owning the biggest yacht in the harbor." "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'll have Captain Morrison prepare her for the weekend." Margaret's face lit up with genuine surprise. She'd obviously expected resistance, maybe even hoped for it. Drama had become her specialty lately, especially when Michael wasn't around to witness her performances. "Thank you so much," she gushed, leaning over to plant a perfunctory kiss on my cheek. Her perfume was expensive and unfamiliar, not the Chanel she'd worn for the past 3 years. Another data point in my growing file of suspicious behavior. After she left, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Long Island Sound. Our estate sat on 12 acres of prime waterfront property, with our private dock extending into waters that had hosted the yachts of Rockefellers and Astors for over a century. The Sea Fortune bobbed gently at anchor, her pristine white hull gleaming in the morning sun. I'd bought that yacht 15 years ago, back when Michael was still in law school and dreaming of following his old man into corporate litigation. Now he spent his days structuring mergers and acquisitions for investment banks, pulling down 7 figures annually while his wife spent her time doing God knows what with people I'd never met. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel Morrison, our yacht captain. "Mrs. Thompson requested the crew take the weekend off. Says she'll handle everything herself." Interesting. Margaret had never shown the slightest interest in nautical responsibilities. She could barely operate the coffee machine in our kitchen, let alone navigate a 90-foot yacht through Connecticut waters. Yet she wanted to dismiss a crew that included a professional captain, engineer, and chef. I typed back, "Understood. Please prepare the boat as requested." Then I placed a different call entirely. "Mitchell Security Services, how may we help you?" "This is Robert Thompson. I need discreet surveillance on my yacht this weekend." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from James Mitchell in his downtown office, 2 blocks from my law firm. Mitchell ran the kind of private investigation service that catered to wealthy families who needed problems solved quietly. Divorce attorneys kept him on speed dial. "What exactly are we documenting, Mr. Thompson?" Mitchell was former FBI, with the kind of steady demeanor that inspired confidence in nervous clients. "My daughter-in-law is using my yacht for activities I need to understand better." I slid a recent photograph of Margaret across his desk. "I suspect she's not hosting the innocent social gathering she described." Mitchell studied the photo with professional interest. Margaret was undeniably attractive, with the kind of polished beauty that money could enhance but not create. Blonde hair that cost more than most people's monthly salary, skin that had never seen an honest day's work, and eyes that had learned to see dollar signs before human feelings. "Marital infidelity?" Mitchell asked directly. "Possibly. But I need facts, not assumptions." I leaned forward in my chair. "My son loves his wife. If she's betraying that trust, he deserves to know. But if I'm wrong, I need to know that too." "Standard surveillance package runs $800 a day, plus expenses. Money's not the issue. Discretion is everything." Mitchell nodded, understanding. He'd worked enough high-net-worth cases to know that family reputations were often more valuable than family fortunes. "We'll have equipment positioned by Friday evening. Full video and audio documentation of all activities aboard your yacht." Friday afternoon, I received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Thompson, this is Sandra Chen from the Metropolitan Golf Club." I knew Sandra. She handled event coordination for one of Manhattan's most exclusive golf clubs, where membership required both serious money and serious connections. I'd been a member for 25 years. "What can I do for you, Sandra?" "I'm calling about Mrs. Thompson's reservation for tomorrow evening. She's booked our private dining room for 12 guests, but there seems to be some confusion about the billing." My hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of confusion?" "She indicated the charges should go to your corporate account, but when we called your law firm to confirm, they said they had no record of any business entertainment authorization." Of course they didn't. Margaret had never requested corporate billing for anything, and my accounting department was meticulous about tracking every cent of business expenses. "I see. What time is this reservation?" 8 o'clock tomorrow evening, sir. Should we proceed with the arrangement?" "Yes, but change the billing to my personal account. And Sandra? I'll be attending after all." The silence on the line stretched just long enough to become awkward. "Certainly, Mr. Thompson. Should I inform Mrs. Thompson of the change?" "No need. I'll surprise her." That evening I sat in my study reviewing everything I knew about Margaret's recent behavior. The mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly when someone entered the room, the new clothes that appeared in her closet without explanation, the sudden interest in charity events that required overnight trips to the city. Most telling of all were the changes in Michael. My son had always been driven, but lately he seemed exhausted in a way that transcended normal work stress. He'd lost weight, developed dark circles under his eyes, and started drinking more than his usual single scotch after dinner. When I'd asked him about it during our weekly golf game at the country club, he'd attributed everything to pressure from his investment firm. "Big merger coming up," he'd explained, lining up a putt on the 18th green. "Could make or break my partnership track." But I'd seen merger stress before. This looked different. This looked like a man questioning everything he thought he knew about his life. My phone rang just after 10 o'clock. Michael's voice sounded strained, tired. "Dad? Sorry to call so late. I just wanted to let you know I'll be in Boston all weekend. Client emergency. The Hendricks merger? Yeah, they're getting cold feet about some regulatory issues. I need to hold their hand through the weekend or we could lose the deal. Boston, while his wife was hosting mysterious parties on our yacht and booking private dinners at exclusive golf clubs. Drive safe, son. We'll catch up when you get back. After hanging up, I made one more call to Mitchell Security. Change of plans, I told him. I need surveillance on both the yacht and the Metropolitan Golf Club tomorrow night. That's going to require additional personnel. Whatever it costs, I have a feeling tomorrow night is going to be very educational. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Greenwich feel like a Norman Rockwell painting. I dressed carefully for dinner at the Metropolitan, choosing a navy suit that projected authority without ostentation. At my age, I'd learned that real power whispered rather than shouted. The drive from Greenwich to Manhattan gave me 40 minutes to think about what I might discover. Part of me hoped Mitchell's surveillance would reveal nothing more than an innocent social gathering, that my suspicions were the paranoid imaginings of an overprotective father-in-law. But 30 years of corporate litigation had taught me to trust my instincts, and every instinct I possessed was screaming that Margaret was playing a dangerous game with our family's future. The Metropolitan Golf Club occupied the top 3 floors of a midtown skyscraper, its windows offering spectacular views of Central Park and the East Side. I'd attended countless business dinners in these rooms, sealing deals that shaped New York's financial landscape for decades. Tonight felt different. Tonight, I was hunting. I arrived at 7:30, early enough to position myself at the bar with clear sightlines to the private dining room entrance. The bartender, a consummate professional named Carlos, greeted me with the recognition that came from 25 years of membership. "The usual, Mr. Thompson?" McAllen, 18, neat. "Perfect, Carlos. And I'll be observing rather than socializing tonight." Carlos nodded with the discretion that made him invaluable to members who sometimes needed privacy for their business conversations. He positioned my drink at the bar's corner table, where I could watch the main entrance while appearing to review documents on my phone. At 7:50, the elevator doors opened and Margaret stepped out. She looked stunning, I had to admit. A black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, jewelry that caught the light from crystal chandeliers, hair and makeup that belonged on magazine covers. She moved through the club with practiced confidence, greeting staff by name and accepting their deference as her natural due. What struck me most was how comfortable she seemed. This wasn't a woman nervous about discovery or guilty about deception. This was someone who believed she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she had every right to do. 3 minutes later, the elevator opened again, and everything changed. The man who emerged was maybe 45, tall and athletic, with the kind of confident posture that came from a lifetime of privilege. His suit was hand-tailored, his watch was Swiss, and his smile suggested someone accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted from life. Margaret's face lit up when she saw him, not with the polite pleasure of social acquaintance, but with the genuine joy of someone greeting their heart's desire. She walked directly to him, and when he kissed her cheek, the gesture lingered just long enough to cross lines that married women shouldn't cross. I took out my phone and activated the camera function, zooming in on their faces as they spoke quietly near the elevator. Their body language told a story that no innocent explanation could cover. The way she touched his arm, the way he leaned closer than necessary to hear her words, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. This wasn't a business dinner or a social gathering. This was a date. They moved toward the private dining room, and I gave them a 5-minute head start before following. The corridor leading to our private rooms was lined with photographs of club members from decades past, titans of industry whose handshakes had moved billions of dollars and shaped American commerce. I wondered what those men would think about my current situation. Their photographs seemed to watch as I prepared to confront the woman who was destroying my son's marriage and threatening everything our family had built. The maitre d' approached as I neared the private dining room. "Mr. Thompson, your table is ready whenever you'd like to join the party." "In a few minutes, Philippe." "I want to make sure everyone's arrived first." Through the partially open door, I could hear laughter and conversation. Not 12 voices, as Margaret had claimed, but maybe 5 or 6 people. An intimate gathering, not a large social event. I moved closer, positioning myself where I could see into the room without being noticed. Margaret sat at the head of the table, playing hostess with natural grace. The man from the elevator was beside her, his hand resting casually on the back of her chair in a gesture of easy intimacy. 4 other people completed the party, 2 couples I didn't recognize but who carried themselves with the casual confidence of serious money. What I heard next stopped me cold. "To new beginnings," Margaret raised her champagne glass, her voice carrying clearly through the open door. "And to finally being free to live the life I deserve." The table joined her toast, crystal chiming against crystal in celebration of something that made my blood run cold. Free to live the life she deserved, while married to my son, using my money, sleeping in my family's home. The man beside her spoke next, his voice educated and smooth. "The divorce papers should be finalized within 60 days. After that, we can make everything official." Divorce papers. My son was in Boston working desperately to save a merger deal while his wife was toasting their divorce with her lover and celebrating with people he'd never met. I stepped back from the door, my heart racing with rage and calculation in equal measure. This wasn't just adultery, this was a carefully planned dissolution of my son's marriage, orchestrated while he was too busy working to notice the destruction of his personal life. My phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell Security. "Yacht activities documented. You'll want to see this footage." Whatever Margaret had been doing on our family yacht, it was now permanently recorded. Between tonight's dinner and the weekend's yacht activities, I had everything needed to protect my son from the woman who was systematically destroying his life. But first, I needed to make my presence known. I straightened my tie, composed my expression into the neutral mask that had served me well in countless legal negotiations, and walked through the door of the private dining room. "Good evening, everyone," I said pleasantly, watching Margaret's face transform from confident celebration to absolute horror. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The room fell silent except for the soft jazz playing through the sound system. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me with expressions ranging from confusion to panic, but none more stricken than Margaret's. She recovered faster than I'd expected, her social training kicking in despite the shock. "Dad Thompson." Her voice was bright but artificial, like costume jewelry trying to pass for diamonds. "What a wonderful surprise! I didn't know you were in the city tonight." "Last-minute decision," I replied, moving toward the empty chair at the foot of the table. "I hope you don't mind if I join you." The man beside Margaret stood up, extending his hand with practiced confidence. "Robert Ashworth," he said. "Margaret's spoken of you often." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. Whatever else he might be, Ashworth wasn't a coward. "Has she?" I smiled pleasantly. "And what exactly has she said?" Margaret's face went pale, but Ashworth seemed unfazed by the question. Just that you're a successful attorney with strong family values. She obviously admires you greatly. Strong family values. The irony was so thick you could serve it for dessert. Family is everything, I agreed, taking my seat. Which is why I'm so interested in meeting Margaret's friends. Especially ones I haven't heard about before. The other couples at the table shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing undercurrents they didn't understand. One of the women, an elegant redhead in her 40s, attempted to break the tension. Margaret was just telling us about the lovely yacht trip you provided for her friends. Ah, yes, the yacht. I signaled the waiter for a menu. I trust everyone enjoyed the Sea Fortune's amenities? Margaret's knuckles were white as she gripped her champagne glass. It was perfect, thank you. Excellent. I'll be interested to hear all about it. I opened the menu casually. But first, let's order dinner. I find family discussions go better on a full stomach. The word family hung in the air like expensive perfume, overwhelming and impossible to ignore. Margaret knew I'd heard the toast about new beginnings and divorce papers. Ashworth was beginning to realize he'd walked into a trap, and I was just getting started. The waiter appeared beside me with professional timing. Good evening, Mr. Thompson. Your usual table wine? Actually, let's celebrate tonight. Bring us your finest champagne. I looked directly at Margaret. After all, it sounds like we have quite a few new beginnings to toast. Margaret's hand trembled slightly as she set down her glass, and I noticed Ashworth's confident demeanor beginning to crack around the edges. The other guests looked increasingly uncomfortable, probably wondering what they'd stumbled into. But this was only the beginning. By the time the evening was over, everyone at this table would understand exactly what happened when someone tried to destroy the Thompson family. The real education was just getting started. The waiter returned with our champagne, and I watched Margaret's face as he poured the golden liquid into crystal flutes. Her earlier confidence had evaporated like morning mist, replaced by the careful calculation of someone trying to minimize damage from an unexpected disaster. So, Robert, I said, using Ashworth's first name with deliberate familiarity, what line of work are you in? He straightened his shoulders, probably grateful for what seemed like safe conversational territory. Corporate finance. I run the private equity division at Sterling Capital Management. Sterling Capital. I knew them by reputation, aggressive investors who specialized in hostile takeovers and asset stripping. They'd tried to acquire one of my law firm's major clients 2 years ago, using tactics that bordered on corporate warfare. Interesting field, I replied. Very cutthroat, from what I understand. Competition keeps everyone sharp, Ashworth smiled, warming to his subject. We focus on undervalued assets with unrealized potential. Undervalued assets. I wondered if that's how he viewed my daughter-in-law, a married woman whose potential could be unlocked through strategic acquisition. And how did you and Margaret meet? The question hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigar. Margaret's eyes darted between Ashworth and me, clearly hoping he'd navigate this particular minefield with more skill than honesty. Through mutual friends at the yacht club, Ashworth replied smoothly. We discovered we have quite a lot in common. The yacht club, where membership cost 6 figures annually and required recommendations from 3 existing members. I'd been a founding member 30 years ago, back when the club was just ambitious blueprints and wealthy men's dreams. Which yacht club would that be? I asked pleasantly. Harbor Point, Margaret answered quickly, probably hoping to control the narrative. You know, the one in Stamford. I took a sip of champagne, savoring both the vintage and the moment. Harbor Point Yacht Club had been closed for renovations since March, a fact that anyone with actual membership would know. Margaret's lie hung between us like a sword, sharp and obvious and ready to cut. "Ah, yes, Harbor Point," I nodded. "Beautiful facility. I trust they've finished the restoration work on the main clubhouse?" Ashworth's confident expression flickered. "Restoration work?" "The fire damage from last winter," I continued smoothly. "Such a shame about the dining room. Though I hear they're reopening next month. There had been no fire, no damage, no closure for restoration. Harbor Point was operating normally and had been all year. But neither Margaret nor her lover knew enough about the club to call my bluff." "Right, the fire," Margaret said weakly. "Terrible thing." The other guests at our table were beginning to sense something beneath the surface of our polite conversation. The elegant redhead who'd spoken earlier was studying my face with the careful attention of someone trying to solve a puzzle. My phone buzzed discreetly against my leg. A text from Mitchell Security. "Package delivered to your home office." Video evidence is comprehensive. Perfect timing. By now, detailed documentation of Margaret's yacht activities was sitting on my desk, ready to complete the picture of her betrayal. But first, I wanted to see how deep this deception went. "Tell me about your weekend on the Sea Fortune," I said to the table generally. "I'm always interested in how guests enjoy the yacht's amenities." The silence stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable. Ashworth and Margaret exchanged glances that spoke volumes about shared secrets and mutual guilt. "It was lovely," one of the other women offered hesitantly. "Very relaxing." "I'm glad to hear it. The Sea Fortune has been in our family for 15 years. My late wife chose every detail of the interior design." I paused, letting that information settle. "She believed a yacht should feel like home, not just transportation." Margaret's face went pale at the mention of my deceased wife. She'd never met Eleanor, who'd passed away 5 years before Michael's wedding, but she knew enough family history to understand that the yacht was sacred ground. "Your wife had excellent taste," Ashworth said, apparently trying to steer the conversation toward safer territory. "She did indeed." "Eleanor would have loved to meet you, Robert. She had strong opinions about the kind of people who were welcome aboard our family's vessel." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Everyone at the table could feel the temperature dropping, even if they didn't understand why. "Dad Thompson," Margaret finally spoke up, her voice strained with artificial brightness. "Perhaps we should order dinner?" "I'm sure everyone's getting hungry." "Excellent idea," I agreed, signaling the waiter, "though I find my appetite varies depending on the company." We ordered our meals with the forced politeness of people trapped in an elevator together. Ashworth requested the lobster, Margaret chose salmon, and I ordered the steak, bloody rare, like my mood. As the waiter departed, my phone rang. Michael's ringtone. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "Family call." I stepped into the corridor, grateful for the privacy. "Dad? How's everything at home?" My son's voice sounded exhausted, stretched thin by work pressure and emotional strain he didn't fully understand yet. "Everything's fine, Michael. How's Boston treating you?" "Like a nightmare. The client's having second thoughts about everything, and we're basically rebuilding the entire deal structure from scratch." He paused, and I could hear hotel room silence in the background. "I probably won't make it home until Tuesday." Tuesday? That gave Margaret 3 more days to execute whatever plan she'd been developing. 3 more days to cover her tracks or destroy evidence or disappear entirely. Don't worry about home, I said carefully. I'm keeping an eye on things. Thanks, Dad. I know Margaret gets lonely when I'm traveling so much. Maybe you could check on her this weekend? The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. My son was worried about his wife's loneliness while she was toasting their divorce with her lover 30 feet away from me. I'll make sure she's not alone, I promised. After hanging up, I remained in the corridor for another minute, composing myself for the next phase of the evening. Through the partially open door, I could hear nervous conversation from our dining room, the kind of stilted exchange that happens when people are trying to avoid topics that might explode. When I returned to the table, our salads had arrived. Margaret was pushing lettuce around her plate without eating, while Ashworth seemed to be calculating his best exit strategy. "That was Michael," I announced, settling back into my chair. "He sends his regards." Margaret's fork clattered against her plate. "Michael called?" "Work emergency in Boston. He'll be tied up through Tuesday." I watched her face carefully. "I told him I'd keep an eye on things here." The relief in her expression was fleeting, quickly replaced by the realization that my keeping an eye on things might not work in her favor. "How thoughtful of you," she managed. "Family takes care of family," I replied, "though I've noticed that different people have different definitions of family loyalty." Ashworth finally decided to address the elephant in the room. "Mr. Thompson, I get the feeling you're unhappy about something. If Margaret and I have done something to offend you—" "Offend me?" I set down my fork and looked directly at him. "Robert, do you know what I did for a living before I retired?" "Margaret mentioned you were an attorney." "Corporate litigation, specifically. 30 years of hostile takeovers, merger disputes, and contract violations." I smiled pleasantly. "I spent 3 decades in courtrooms, documenting lies and exposing fraudulent behavior." The color began draining from Ashworth's face as he grasped the implications. "I'm very good at recognizing deception," I continued. "It's a professional skill that transfers well to personal situations." Margaret's hands were trembling now, barely visible shakes that betrayed her growing panic. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Ashworth said carefully. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "For instance, Harbor Point Yacht Club has been operating normally all year. No fire, no restoration, no closure. The lie hung between us like a smoking gun." Margaret and Ashworth both stared at the phone as if it might explode. "Secondly," I continued, "Sterling Capital Management attempted a hostile takeover of Meridian Industries in 2019. My law firm represented Meridian. We won." Ashworth's confidence finally cracked completely. "You're Thompson and Associates. Founding partner, yes, which means I know exactly who you are, Robert, and exactly what kind of business practices you employ." I leaned back in my chair. "The question is, what kind of personal practices do you employ?" The other guests at our table were now openly staring, their own conversations forgotten in favor of the drama unfolding before them. "I think perhaps we should continue this discussion privately," Ashworth suggested. "Privacy is overrated," I replied. "Besides, I believe in transparency, especially when it comes to family matters." Margaret finally found her voice. "Dad Thompson, you're embarrassing everyone. Can't we just enjoy dinner?" "Embarrassment is interesting, isn't it?" I picked up my champagne glass. "Some people feel embarrassed when they're caught in lies. Others feel embarrassed when they're betraying their spouse's trust. And some people should feel embarrassed, but apparently don't." The words landed like physical blows. Margaret's face went white, and Ashworth pushed back from the table slightly, probably calculating his escape route. "What exactly are you accusing us of?" he demanded. I smiled, feeling the satisfaction of a chess player announcing checkmate. "I'm not accusing you of anything, Robert. I'm simply stating that I know exactly what you've been doing on my yacht, exactly what you're planning with my daughter-in-law, and exactly how you've been manipulating my son's marriage." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background jazz seemed to pause as 6 pairs of eyes stared at me with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. Margaret broke first. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Michael and we're not happy. We haven't been happy for a long time." "Happiness is subjective," I replied calmly. "Marriage vows are not." "But you don't know what it's like," she continued, her voice growing stronger with desperation. "He's never home. When he is home, he's working. I might as well be married to his laptop." "So you decided to console yourself with Robert here?" Ashworth stood up abruptly. "I think this conversation has gone far enough." "Sit down," I said quietly. The tone of my voice must have carried more authority than I intended, because Ashworth actually sat back down. 30 years of commanding courtrooms had given me a presence that could stop arguments in their tracks. "You see, Robert, Margaret, here's what's going to happen next." I folded my hands on the table with deliberate precision. "Tomorrow morning, you're both going to hear from my attorneys. Not as a threat, but as a courtesy notification that certain legal documents are being prepared." Margaret's eyes widened with panic. "What legal documents?" "Prenuptial agreement violations, for starters. Did you read the fine print when you married my son, Margaret? The clauses about adultery and asset protection?" From her expression, she clearly hadn't. Michael had insisted on a comprehensive prenup, not because he didn't trust Margaret, but because I'd insisted on protecting family assets accumulated over generations. "Secondly," I continued, "there's the matter of conversion. Using family property for unauthorized purposes, specifically my yacht and this club membership." "You said I could use the yacht," Margaret protested, "for a social gathering with friends, not for romantic encounters with your lover." The words hung in the air like a judge's verdict, final, damning, and legally precise. Ashworth finally recovered his voice. "You can't prove anything," I laughed, a sound that held no humor whatsoever. "Robert, I've been documenting Margaret's behavior for months. Phone records, credit card statements, GPS tracking from her car, and—" I paused for maximum impact. "Comprehensive video surveillance from this weekend's yacht activities." Margaret gasped audibly. "Video surveillance? Professional grade. Audio and visual documentation of everything that happened aboard the Sea Fortune." I looked directly at her. "Everything." The implications hit both of them simultaneously. Whatever they'd done on the yacht was now permanently recorded, admissible as evidence in divorce proceedings, and potentially criminal charges depending on what other laws they'd violated. "This is blackmail," Ashworth said desperately. "This is justice," I corrected, though I suppose the distinction might be unclear to someone in your profession. The other guests at our table were now leaning away from us, probably wishing they'd chosen different dinner companions. But I wasn't finished yet. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm and businesslike. "Margaret, you're going to pack your belongings and leave my house tonight. You'll stay somewhere else until Michael returns from Boston." "You can't throw me out of my own home," she protested. "It's not your home." "It's my home, where you've been living as my son's wife." But since you've decided to terminate that relationship, your residency privileges are revoked." "And if we refuse?" Ashworth asked. I smiled, feeling the cold satisfaction of absolute victory. "Then tomorrow morning, copies of the surveillance footage will be delivered to your board of directors at Sterling Capital, along with a detailed report about your personal conduct. I'm sure they'll be fascinated to learn how their private equity director spends his weekends." Ashworth's face went gray. A scandal like this could destroy his career, especially at a firm that catered to conservative old-money clients who valued discretion and moral character. "You wouldn't," Margaret whispered. "Try me." The three words carried the weight of 30 years in courtrooms, 30 years of following through on every threat and promise I'd ever made. Margaret knew me well enough to understand that I didn't bluff. Our main courses arrived, but nobody seemed interested in eating any more. The elegant dinner party had transformed into a tribunal, with me as both prosecutor and judge. "I need to use the restroom," Margaret said shakily, standing up. "Of course. Robert can keep me company while you're gone." After she left, Ashworth and I stared at each other across the table like gunfighters waiting for someone to draw first. "You know, Robert," I said conversationally, "I actually respect you in a way." He looked genuinely surprised. "You do?" "You identified an undervalued asset and moved to acquire it. Very professional approach. I cut a piece of steak with surgical precision. The problem is you misunderstood the ownership structure." "Meaning?" "Meaning Margaret was never a free agent. She belongs to my family, and my family protects its own. Even when she doesn't want to be protected." I looked at him with something approaching pity. "Robert, you're 45 years old and you're dating a married woman. That's not romance. That's a midlife crisis with expensive taste." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Margaret and I love each other. Margaret loves your bank account and your yacht club connections. You love the idea of stealing another man's wife." I leaned forward slightly. "But here's what you don't understand about love, son. Real love doesn't require destroying other people's lives. Her marriage was already destroyed. I didn't cause that." "No, but you've been very happy to profit from it." Margaret returned from the restroom, her face freshly powdered but her eyes red-rimmed. She'd clearly been crying, probably calling someone for advice or rescue. "Feel better?" I asked pleasantly. She nodded without speaking, sitting down carefully as if sudden movements might trigger another explosion. "Excellent! Now, where were we? Ah, yes, the terms of your departure." "Terms?" Ashworth asked. "I'm a lawyer, Robert." "Everything has terms." I pulled out a legal pad from my jacket and began writing. "First, Margaret vacates my property tonight. Second, all contact with my son ceases immediately except through attorneys. Third, any attempt to access family financial accounts results in immediate criminal charges." I looked up from my notes. "Are we clear so far?" Margaret nodded miserably. "Fourth, Robert, you're going to end whatever business relationship you have with anyone in my professional network. That includes the Hendricks merger Michael's working on in Boston." Ashworth's eyes widened. "You know about Hendricks?" "I know Hendricks personally. We've been friends for 20 years. I smiled coldly. "Did you really think you could target my family without me finding out who you are and what you want?" The realization hit him like a freight train. This wasn't a coincidental meeting at a yacht club. This was a carefully orchestrated plan that had been months in the making. "You've been watching us," he said. "I've been protecting my family." "There's a difference." Margaret finally spoke up, her voice small and defeated. "What about my things? My clothes? My jewelry? You can collect them tomorrow while Michael's still in Boston. My housekeeper will supervise. And my car? I consulted my notes again. The BMW is registered in Michael's name. You can arrange alternative transportation. The full scope of her situation was finally becoming clear. Without Michael's income and my family's resources, Margaret would be returning to the middle-class existence she'd escaped through marriage. No more designer clothes, no more country club memberships, no more yacht weekends with wealthy friends. "This is cruel," she whispered. "Cruel would be letting you continue destroying my son's life while he works 18-hour days, trying to build a future for your marriage." I folded my legal pad and put it away. "This is just consequences." Ashworth made one last attempt at negotiation. "What if we agree to end things? What if Margaret stays in the marriage and we never see each other again?" I looked at him with genuine surprise. "Robert, you really don't understand, do you?" "Understand what?" "This isn't about punishment. This is about character." I gestured between them. "You've both shown me exactly who you are. Margaret has shown my son exactly what their marriage means to her. The relationship is over, not because I'm ending it, but because you already ended it months ago." The truth of that statement settled over the table like winter fog. Margaret started crying again, quiet tears that acknowledged the finality of what was happening. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said, "but it did go this far. And now we all have to live with the consequences." I signaled the waiter for the check, ready to conclude this particular chapter of the evening. "The remainder of tonight's entertainment will be moving to a different venue," I announced to the table. "I need to make some phone calls, and I suspect Margaret and Robert have their own arrangements to finalize." As I signed the check, I looked around the table one last time. The other guests who'd been drawn into this drama looked relieved that it was ending. Ashworth looked like a man whose world had just collapsed, and Margaret looked like someone finally understanding the true cost of her choices. "One final thought," I said, standing up. "Robert, you mentioned earlier that competition keeps everyone sharp. You were right about that. You just didn't realize you were competing against someone with 30 years more experience than you have." I walked toward the exit, leaving behind the wreckage of Margaret's carefully planned new beginning. Tomorrow would bring the real consequences: legal documents, property divisions, and the conversation I'd been dreading with my son. But tonight, justice had been served with dinner, and it tasted exactly as satisfying as I'd imagined. The drive from Manhattan back to Greenwich gave me 90 minutes to process what had just happened and prepare for what came next. Margaret's confession, Ashworth's exposure, the complete collapse of their carefully constructed deception. It all felt surreal against the backdrop of Connecticut's peaceful suburban landscape. My phone rang just as I passed the Stamford exit. Mitchell Security. "Mr. Thompson?" I trust the evening was enlightening. "More than I expected," I replied. "What did the yacht surveillance reveal?" "Comprehensive documentation of intimate activities between Mrs. Thompson and Mr. Ashworth, along with discussions about your son's business dealings and what appears to be planning for their future together." The implications were clear enough. This wasn't just adultery. It was a calculated plan to destroy my son's marriage while positioning themselves for maximum financial advantage. "How detailed is the documentation?" "Complete audio and video records of their weekend activities, more than sufficient for legal proceedings." I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house where Margaret had been living as my son's wife while systematically betraying everything our family represented. The front door opened before I could reach it. Margaret stood in the doorway, her earlier evening elegance replaced by jeans and a sweater, a suitcase visible behind her in the foyer. "I packed the essentials," she said without meeting my eyes. "I'll arrange to get the rest later." "Very practical of you." She looked up then, and I saw something I hadn't expected, genuine remorse mixed with the fear and anger. "I know you think I'm a terrible person," she said quietly. "Maybe I am. But I want you to know that I did love Michael once. Really loved him. But not enough to honor your vows. No," she admitted, "not enough for that." The honesty was surprising, and almost admirable in its simplicity. "Where will you go?" I asked. "Robert has a place in the city. We'll figure things out from there." Robert? Still planning a future with the man who would lose his job within the week once the yacht surveillance footage reached his board of directors. "Margaret, may I give you some advice?" She nodded, probably hoping for some small mercy. "When my son calls from Boston, and he will call, let him hear it from me first. Don't try to manage the narrative or minimize what happened. He deserves the truth. Will you tell him everything?" "I'll tell him what he needs to know to make informed decisions about his future." She picked up her suitcase, then paused at the threshold. "Will you ever forgive me?" The question caught me off guard. In all my planning for this confrontation, I hadn't considered the possibility that she might actually care about redemption. "Margaret, forgiveness isn't about what you deserve. It's about what my son needs to heal from this." I held the door open for her. "If Michael can forgive you someday, then so can I." She nodded and walked to her car, Michael's BMW, which she'd be returning soon enough. I watched her drive away, then went inside to prepare for the most difficult phone call of my life. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of autumn in Connecticut. I was in my study reviewing the surveillance footage when my phone rang. Michael, calling from his Boston hotel. "Dad?" Margaret's not answering her phone. "Is everything okay?" I muted the video on my computer screen and prepared to destroy my son's world in order to save his future. "Michael, I need you to sit down." "What's wrong?" Did something happen to Margaret? In a way, yes, but not the way you're thinking. I took a deep breath. "Son, your wife has been having an affair." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. "Dad, that's impossible." Margaret would never. "I have video evidence, Michael. Complete documentation of her activities with Robert Ashworth from Sterling Capital." "Sterling Capital?" His voice cracked slightly. "The firm that's been trying to interfere with the Hendricks merger." "The same firm." "This isn't coincidence, son. This is corporate espionage wrapped in adultery." I heard him sink into a chair, the sound of hotel furniture creaking under sudden weight. "How long have you known?" "I've suspected for months. I confirmed it this weekend." "Why didn't you tell me?" The question I'd been dreading. "How do you explain to your child that you let them suffer in order to gather evidence that would protect them?" "Because I needed proof you could use in court. Because I needed to make sure she couldn't take half of everything you've worked for." I paused. "And because I hoped I was wrong." Michael was quiet for a long time, processing information that would reshape his understanding of the past year. "Where is she now?" "Gone. She moved out Saturday night." "To be with him?" "Yes." Another long silence, then a sound that broke my heart. My son crying quietly in a hotel room 400 miles away. "Michael, listen to me. You're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together." How could I have been so blind? His voice was thick with pain and self-recrimination. How could I not have seen it? Because you loved her and trusted her. That's not blindness, son. That's being a good husband to someone who didn't deserve it. What happens now? Now you come home. We'll meet with the attorneys, review the evidence, and file for divorce on grounds of adultery. The prenup will protect most of your assets. And her. Margaret will face the consequences of her choices, as will Ashworth. Tuesday evening, Michael's car pulled into our driveway just as the sun was setting over Long Island Sound. I watched from my study window as my son climbed out slowly, moving like someone recovering from physical injury. He looked older when he walked through the front door, aged by betrayal and disillusionment in ways that time alone couldn't accomplish. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "I feel like an idiot," he said simply. 3 years of marriage and I never saw any of it. You saw what she wanted you to see. That's what manipulative people do. We sat in my study while I showed him selected portions of the surveillance footage, enough to confirm the affair without traumatizing him with unnecessary details. His face remained carefully neutral throughout, the expression of someone compartmentalizing pain in order to function. "The Hendricks merger," he said suddenly. "She knew all about it. Ashworth's been getting inside information through her." "That's what I suspected. We'll need to report that to your firm's security department." "My career is over," he said quietly. "Even if I'm not directly responsible, the security breach happened through my marriage. Goldman Sachs won't tolerate that kind of liability." "Michael, look at me." I waited until he met my eyes. "Your career isn't over. It's evolving. Thompson and Associates has been looking for a new partner specializing in corporate mergers and acquisitions. For the first time since he'd arrived, something like hope flickered in his expression. "You want me to join the firm?" "I want you to eventually take over the firm." "But yes, joining would be the first step." "Dad, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept charity." "Son, Thompson and Associates generates $47 million in annual revenue. This isn't charity. This is succession planning." The number obviously surprised him. Most people, including his wife, had no idea how successful my law practice had become over the decades. "Think about it," I continued. "No corporate politics, no investment bank pressure, no 100-hour weeks that destroy marriages. Just family business. Just family taking care of family." Wednesday morning brought news that completed the circle of justice. My phone rang at 8 a.m. sharp. "Mr. Thompson?" "This is Sandra Chen from the Metropolitan Golf Club." "Good morning, Sandra. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to inform you that Mr. Robert Ashworth's membership has been terminated effective immediately." "I see. May I ask why?" "The board reviewed certain materials that called his character into question. We felt his continued membership would be inappropriate. The certain materials had been the surveillance footage delivered anonymously to key board members, along with documentation of Ashworth's involvement in corporate espionage. The yacht club and country club had received similar packages." "Thank you for letting me know, Sandra." "Of course. And, Mr. Thompson, your son's guest privileges have been restored and expanded. We look forward to seeing more of him." That afternoon, Mitchell Security called with the final update. "Ashworth was terminated from Sterling Capital this morning, effective immediately, with cause, no severance package." "And the legal proceedings?" "The evidence packages have been delivered to all relevant parties. Your daughter-in-law's attorney should be receiving divorce papers within the hour." 6 months later, I stood in the main conference room of Thompson and Associates, watching my son address a room full of corporate attorneys. The Hendricks merger had been completed successfully after Ashworth's interference was eliminated, and Michael had earned a reputation as one of Connecticut's most skilled negotiators. The divorce had been finalized, with Margaret receiving minimal assets due to the adultery clause in her prenup. She'd moved to California with what remained of her relationship with Ashworth, who was now working for a small regional firm after being blacklisted from major corporate finance positions. "The Johnson acquisition should close by Friday," Michael was saying to our team. "They've accepted all our terms regarding liability protection and employee retention." After the meeting, we walked out to the parking garage together. "Any regrets?" I asked as we reached our cars. Michael considered the question seriously. "About Margaret? Number? About not seeing it sooner? Sometimes, but mostly, I'm grateful." "Grateful?" "Grateful that I found out who she really was before we had children. Grateful that I have a father who protected me even when it was painful." He smiled for the first time in months. "Grateful that I learned what real loyalty looks like." I thought about Margaret's question from that night she moved out. Would I ever forgive her? The answer had surprised me. I already had. Not because she deserved it, but because carrying anger was a choice, and I'd chosen to focus on rebuilding rather than revenge. The sunset over Greenwich Harbor painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson as I drove home to our family estate. The Sea Fortune bobbed peacefully at anchor, no longer carrying the weight of betrayal and deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Dinner Sunday? I'm bringing someone I'd like you to meet. Someone new. Someone who hopefully understood that real love meant protecting the people you care about, not exploiting their trust for personal gain." I typed back, "Looking forward to it." Family dinner at 7. Family. In the end, that's what mattered. Not the money or the prestige or the social connections, but the people who stood by you when everything else fell apart. Margaret had learned that lesson too late. Michael had learned it just in time. And I had learned that sometimes the hardest thing about being a father is watching your children get hurt by people they love. But I'd also learned that justice, served with patience and precision, tastes exactly as satisfying as I'd always imagined it would. The Thompson family was stronger now, tempered by crisis and unified by truth. And that was worth more than all the yacht clubs and golf memberships in the world. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.